Want to hear my superpower? Planning deadlines for myself so I don't get stuck procrastinating. I know it doesn't sound glamorous like being able to walk through walls or being able to fly, but I know this superpower is one thing that has made me most successful in my career. I've spent years developing a system for planning for giant, monster, overwhelming tasks so that I can stop procrastinating and take consistent action towards my goals, even on those days when my motivation is low and I just don't want to get started. Today, I'm sharing my secret sauce with you. I'll let you in on how I use this superpower in my business and the step by step system I use to plan my way out of procrastination, and how you can use it too. Okay, let's dive in. My superpower is planning. I know I've always said if I had a magical superpower, it would be teleportation, because traveling for me is the worst. I love visiting family and friends or exploring new places, but it's the getting there that's the problem. Endless lines in airports, travel delays, and the instant motion sickness I feel as soon as I get on a moving vehicle are part of the problem. But the more I've worked on my own personal development and in my business over the last few years, the more that I've come to recognize my real life superpower is a specific type of planning. I'm not great at planning events like parties. I'm more of the everyone show up at my house and we'll order pizza type of party planner. But I'm really good at planning for deadlines, especially when those deadlines I have to control myself. I think this superpower is the key factor in my success so far in my career. It helps me stay on track, keep motivated, and stop procrastinating on those days when I'm tempted to say, I'll just do that tomorrow. Unlike superpowers in the movies, my planning powers didn't come to me instantly. There was no aha moment where I magically figured it all out and woke up being excellent at taking action and getting things done. This superpower is really a skill that I've honed through a lot of practice. Let me give you a quick backstory for some context. Back when I was a graduate student in school, a huge part of my PhD was completing a major research project called a dissertation. It involves a ton of steps: coming up with the idea, making a proposal, getting ethics approval from the university. Then you have to collect data, analyze that data, write up a giant report, only to have to go through the worst exam of my life at the end. You can check out episode 15 for the whole story of that exam, including how I had to staple my pants together right before. The hardest part of this whole project is staying on track. It's easy to lose momentum and to procrastinate because I had years to complete the project. It takes at least 4 or 5 years to complete graduate school. And you're not just doing this project, you're also taking classes, doing practicum and internship training in hospitals and other healthcare settings. So there was a ton on my plate. And I gotta tell you, I was tempted a million times to say, I'll start this tomorrow and put that project off. I saw a lot of my colleagues struggle with procrastination on their own dissertation research, taking 10 plus years to complete their projects. And if you haven't gone to grad school before, you probably still know where I'm coming from, right? You've probably been in a situation before, maybe at work or in your home life, where you had a deadline that was way far off in the future. Maybe not 5 years in the future like me, but a project where the deadline isn't urgent. Maybe it's a big report for a client, but it's not due for a month. So every day you get up and you know you should probably get started, but there's a million other tasks on your to-do list that feel more urgent, right? So you put it off until tomorrow and the next day, and procrastination sets in. And all of a sudden, that report is due tomorrow and you're in panic mode. Ugh, why did I procrastinate so long? I can't believe I did this again. I wish I could just be more motivated and get things done. And if you're in that spiral of self doubt, perfectionism, and beating yourself up because it doesn't feel like you're working hard enough, you know it saps your motivation even more. So, why do we do this? Why do we procrastinate when we know it would be way more effective to start that task right now when we have lots of time? Two of the primary reasons your brain makes you procrastinate are no urgency or pressure, or the task feels like a giant, overwhelming monster. Let me break each of those down. Way back in episode 62, I shared about a famous study by psychology researchers named Yerkes and Dodson. What they found was when it comes to stress, we need a little bit of pressure to get us off the couch and to get us to take action. Remember back in college when you waited until the last minute to finish that project? Yeah, me too. Although I consider this type of planning my superpower, I've definitely done my fair share of procrastinating in the past, especially when something wasn't urgent. And in our busy world, there are always a million other things that feel more urgent, right? That client report isn't due until next week, but today I have 20 phone calls and 50 emails staring at me, and my brain feels these are much more urgent and need to be tackled now. Even if somewhere in the back of my mind, I know that project is way more crucial to my goals. But too much stress, like a giant overwhelming monster project you're avoiding, also makes us slip back into procrastination and avoidance mode. Maybe that client report is going to take you hours, or it's something you're not as comfortable tackling, something new. When projects or tasks feel too big or too overwhelming, it puts your brain into defense mode. Your brain doesn't want to get started because it's coming up with all these stories about how hard that task is going to be. Ugh, it's going to take me ages. I'll never get it done. I don't know how to do that part anyway. I'm not smart enough or quick enough or talented enough or whatever enough to do it. So let's just procrastinate and deal with it later. Sound familiar? I said that planning for big projects with vague or no deadlines is my superpower. And I use this superpower to help motivate me to take action, especially when my brain wants to slip back into the default mode of procrastinating or doing all the other tasks on my to-do list first, all that busy work, and avoiding the one thing that will really help me make progress. I've been honing this skill for a while, since well before my graduate school days. It helped me be the first in my class to graduate because I stayed on track with my goals, and I truly believe it's one of the skills that helps me be successful in my life today. I'm going to walk you through how I put this superpower into action and how I did this when I was planning a recent project. Then I'll show you how you can develop the superpower of planning and taking action in your own life. If you're listening to this episode on the podcast, I encourage you to jump on over to my YouTube channel after you're done listening and watch the bonus video that goes with it. I'm going to share my screen and show you exactly how I do this planning in the video version, so you can see the step-by-step process in action. Okay, here's a situation that required my superpower planning skills. Recently, I planned a major overhaul of my education and coaching business. I had this great idea for a bunch of new resources and trainings for our community. I wanted to create a system to help folks like you find the resources that you need on my website. The first step in this overhaul was to get some feedback from our audience on where exactly you're getting stuck when it comes to time, getting things done, and staying on track with your goals. So what I did was I surveyed our community a few times. P.S. Thank you so much for the feedback if you responded to those surveys. And what I found was that there are 3 places folks tend to get hung up when it comes to your time and energy. Spot number 1, folks get stuck before you even start. Stuck procrastinating, avoiding, and doing anything else rather than starting that task. Spot number 2, endless distractions. You get started, but something always seems to come up that pulls your focus and requires your urgent attention. And spot 3, folks get stuck on the follow through. You get started, make a plan, use all the right strategies to set your day up for success, but your to-do list is so overwhelming, it's impossible to follow through. Or you struggle to say no to extra work, which leaves you feeling overwhelmed and exhausted. By the time this episode goes live, I might even have some of those new resources up on my website. So if you struggle with one of these areas, make sure you hop on over to drnicolebyers.com to check out what's there. Okay, back to planning my superpower. The first step in getting this all planned out was to get an overview of where I needed to go. I did this first on paper because I'm old school and I still learn best with a paper and pencil. But then I transferred it to a Google Doc after because printing is not one of my superpowers, and I even have trouble reading my own writing sometimes. So I needed an electronic version that was legible. What I did was I created a flowchart and a big picture snapshot of where I wanted to go, what my goals were for this project, and the steps I envisioned to get there. It wasn't super detailed at this point, that part comes later, but I find that having this big picture in mind really helps me with planning, goal setting, and time management. So I have this big picture overview of all the main tasks that I need to complete, the big steps I need to make this happen. Then my next step is to set a hard final deadline. I always work backwards when I set my deadlines. I do this first on paper again, because I like having the visual of a calendar in front of me, and I decide where I want all of this completed, when I want it done by. My goal was for the first week in September. So next, I work backwards in my schedule and set hard deadlines for each of the steps leading up to that end goal. In this case, I had 5 big subcategories of tasks I needed to do to reach my ultimate goal of having new resources for each of those points that I mentioned. So I worked backward and assigned deadlines in my calendar for each of these subcategories over the next few months. When I originally did this, September was about 6 months away, so that's how long I was planning out. Here's why deadlines are so important. They keep you accountable. It's easy to put off this type of project when there's no hard and fast deadline, right? And by working backwards like this with the calendar in front of me, it forces me to be both accountable and realistic with my time. Do I actually have enough space over the next 6 months to get this all done? When I can see it all on my calendar, I get clarity of whether it's even possible to do this. Once it's on my paper calendar, I transfer it all to my Google Calendar so I can keep up with it every day. Then what I do is I use a program called Asana to keep me on track. Asana is a project management program. I used to do all of this just in a Google Sheet or Excel document, and that worked great too. But what I love about Asana is it also gives me reminders every week, which I love. Remember, for you as well, reminder, check out the YouTube video that goes with this episode where I'll show you how Asana works and how I use this for my scheduling. What I did next is I take each of these big subcategories of tasks, I put them in Asana, and I break the tasks down into teeny tiny steps. Because those subtasks were still way too big. Things like record a new 2-part training. That actually feels pretty overwhelming. But if I break it down, like brainstorm ideas, draft the workbook, draft each lesson, finalize, edit, and so on, it feels a lot more manageable, right? And this is another time where it forces me to take a realistic look at my schedule. It's easy to underplan how much time we need for big tasks because we forget about all the little tasks that are involved. Breaking it down like this makes me take a realistic look at whether I actually have the time and energy for all the steps involved. Then what I do is I set deadlines for each of these mini tasks and I block time in my schedule for each. Here are the key highlights of my method to avoid procrastinating on monster tasks. Step number 1, write down a broad overview of the main steps required and your end goal to give your brain a 360-degree view of what you're up against. Step number 2, set a hard end deadline to force your brain to stay on track and be accountable. Step number 3, break each task down into as many little tasks you can think of. Then schedule time to do each task. This fights procrastination when you can get each little task down to something that you can do in less than an hour. It feels way less overwhelming and more manageable for your brain that way. Don't forget to jump on over to my YouTube channel next, where I'll be sharing my screen and walk you through how I implement this real time with this project. You'll see my high-level overview, how I plan my deadlines, and how I use Asana and my Google Calendar to keep track of everything. Remember, your brain's default mode when it comes to a task that feels like a monster is to go into procrastination mode. The planning strategies you learned today take some work on the front end, but over the long run, this method will save you time, energy, and actually help you stay on track with your goals. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Nicole Byers, and this is the Bold Life Podcast.